You are listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
Welcome to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. My unusually well-informed guest today is Chris Lambert. Chris is the interim CEO at Payload Technologies. Payload helps energy exploration and production companies automate their logistics, allowing them to gain greater visibility into their business cycles. Today, Chris and I are discussing the impact Payload Technologies is having on the oil and gas industry and his observations on technology innovation in Canada. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's mine. So, Chris, let's start with a look at the company that you lead. First of all, payload.com. That's something of a coup. How did you manage to get that domain name? Were you there for that?
Well, in full disclosure, Tim, I was not there for that, but you're right. What an excellent .com to get. And it's under 40 characters, which seems otherwise impossible these days.
Yeah.
So no, I can't claim that was a success on my part, but kudos to my forerunners, right?
And when was Payload founded, and how has it evolved since you joined the company?
Well, Payload's just over 5 years old now as a company. We've really been in this startup scale-up phase. And so what I'd say has happened is over the last couple of years that since I've been at Payload, we've started to transition from that startup type company much more into the scale-up company. So today, we're over 20 people now. We have a very dedicated staff in terms of the software development side and operation support. All of our disciplines are very, very well, very knowledgeable and very capable. And so, we all know what we're doing. We've been doing it for a while. We have people in the building who have been in the field we're in what I'll call industrial logistics, especially in the oil and gas segment, for most of their working lives. So we have a very good mix of people. The company is really starting to scale up, and we've really coalesced our products now into a more holistic platform.
So I led in with the idea that you serve the oil and gas industry. Where are you located?
So we're located in Calgary, Alberta, and we're downtown the Rogers Building. And, to be honest, though, the last year I haven't been there. So
yeah, it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody watching this can sympathize. It's all been remote. And it's about time, actually, Tim. I think Calgary, especially a lot of our white collar jobs and industry needed a good kick in the pants to realize that having parking your seat, your butt in a seat for 8 hours a day or more is not necessary nor conducive to being productive and adding value to an organization. I think if there's any silver lining in the last year and a bit, it's been that realization.
So that's interesting. What are the other ways that COVID have impacted Alberta and the oil and gas industry?
Well, I think that there are many. We could spend a long time having that discussion. I'll keep it close to home, though, and just kind of restate. I think that the most impactful way that COVID's impacted Albertans has largely been in how we conduct business and how we, maybe a realization of what we do in our time, whether it's work time or personal time. And it's been kind of a forced realization that there are alternatives to the status quo. And I think that, if I were to be a bit deeper on the subject, I might consider this as something that's almost analogous to us as a larger industry. We need to really consider where Alberta is strong in the future, where we're going, especially in the energy industry. Payload's a champion of the ONG space, and we will always be there to support and help those around us. But I also think that there's been a realization that we need to have more diversification. And a challenge in how we do that. And Payloads responded on both fronts. We provide services to really drive down and optimize cost and reduce the errors and omissions and manual work necessary for our customers. But we also are looking to the left and right and seeing a broader picture on how we progress in the future. And I think that is probably analogous to what most folks in Alberta are experiencing.
So when you talk about diversification, are you talking about for Payload or for the oil and gas industry participants? For example, like geothermal is a lot of the same stuff, right? It's drilling, it's piping.
Well, listen, I mean, a lot of the oil and gas companies in Alberta are going to be champions for some of the new technologies, and maybe not new. Geothermal is not necessarily what I would call new per se, or solar power. These are all well-known, established technologies, but the viability of them is not necessarily well established.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're going to need leadership, is on how to transition from something that works on a micro level for your family, perhaps, or as a hobby, or as something that on a small scale is viable, into scaling that up and morphing it into something that works on an industry scale.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of work that's already been done. There's a lot of proof to show that we can head down these directions, but the leaders are going to be the experts in the energy industry. And I think that a lot of those experts reside here in Alberta.
Yeah, for sure. And don't reside necessarily in Ontario, which is where I am. But you know what? I heat my home, I drive my car. I definitely need what you guys are doing. And we're all sort of part of that system, and looking forward to a future where we can also have renewables and that kind of thing. So it's great that you're looking at diversification.
Yeah, and I think for my part, Tim, I'm all for that. I think we all are, and so should we be. The question really is, in what way? What's the vehicle by which we achieve this?
Yeah.
And for me, I've always been a very strong proponent of finding innovative and competitive ways to engage people in industry in finding a path to these solutions which benefit everyone. And time has proven me right. Every time you look at technologies, processes, industries, we've made improvements over time, and we absolutely have, and we continue to do so. And we do so, I think, in an exponentially faster and faster way. And a lot of what drives that is that capitalism, that drive to find and innovate and to find a way to do it better and compete, keeps things fresh, keeps us all on our toes. So for me, it's not about a good guy, bad guy type of scenario. It's more about how do we collectively as a species find a way to improve on what we're doing, and at the same time do so to improve the lives of those around us.
Yeah. And one of the fascinating things that, as I reflected on what your company in particular does, is you can actually make a big impact on the environmental impact of extracting and exploring natural gas and oil by improving the processes, by making sure there's no waste there, by making sure you track things that could be potentially hazardous. And it's a very complicated industry. I mean, I won't claim that I understand how complicated, but I reflect on the fact that I've probably never driven past an oil derrick in my life. But somebody looking at an oil derrick might think that there's only one company involved, but there's myriad companies involved, even on one job site. How is that work organized?
Well, so first off, let me take a step back and say, not to be too analogous here, but I think that one of the lessons I learned early on in life for me was that sometimes, there's that iceberg kind of idea, right? Where you see the tip of the iceberg and there's so much more underneath. And I found during the automobile crisis, now a decade ago, that time it looked like, hey, GM, for General Motors, for instance, might go out of business. So what? It's capitalism. We're just going to have someone else going to step in to fill the gap. But what people don't realize is that, the GM was responsible for hundreds of thousands of jobs indirectly. It wasn't just the people going into work 8 to 5 at the plants or in the offices. It's all the part makers. It's all the service providers. It's all even when you think of IT, data sciences, all of these aspects go into making that vehicle, making it safe, making it cost effective, making it, sexy to drive, right? And so I think that to answer your question, there is a lot of complexity here. And really what happens is there are so many different players, it becomes very difficult to orchestrate this effectively. And what we've found is that there are many cases with customers we've worked with where before we came in, they just didn't have the visibility. It's just that simple. So a lot of them use paper-based systems. That paper has data transposed incorrectly. It gets lost. Bob spills his coffee on it. Whatever. These things happen, and individual cases can be reconciled, but when you start to scale up as an organization, get into larger fleets of dozens or hundreds or thousands, that problem becomes a multi-million dollar problem for any given company annually, and it can lead to some pretty serious consequences with regulations. So Payload has actually developed out an extension to one of our products. So we have, as you probably know, we have the e-ticketing platform, which is largely focused around logistics and field ticketing. We also have the regulatory product called eManifest. And recently we've extended that to add what we call the TGDG paperless product. And that product actually largely addresses some of the complexity that you've mentioned. It is a product that enables Transport Canada to be aware of and in the loop on what's being transported and where. It gives the opportunity for first responders to have access to that information. It gives the companies on the trucking side and on the producer side to have more clarity on what is going where and who is transporting it. And of course, the driver themselves, we're working with Transport Canada to actually ensure some of these trucking companies have the certification to show proof of transportation or TGDG forms, for instance, in a paperless manner. So there's no need to carry the paper and whatnot. So it is a complex space. There are a lot of moving parts, but know that there's a lot of good people and good Albertans behind very innovative solutions today that are helping make it a much simpler one.
So this is interesting to me because as a computer, I'm in the computer field as well, and I've been involved in some efforts to replace paper with a system. And it often comes with a whole lot of benefits, not the least of which is, as you point out, you sometimes only have to enter information once, and then that same information can be reused on multiple tickets. It can maybe pick up your GPS. It can pick up the timestamp. There's all kinds of things to make it more consistent and more accurate. You can even flow it from point to point for invoicing and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I can see a lot of advantages to that. Now, one thing I got to tell you, as an Ontarian, you use TGDG like everybody knows what it's meaning. What does TGDG stand for?
Oh, sorry. So transport of dangerous goods. So,
okay.
These are the forms that you use to identify, those payloads and have, have a record, right? And so TGDG is, transport of dangerous goods.
And so when I Googled that, I got to, I think it was a Canada, a federal government document is talking about, because I put in TGDG oil and gas, and they were talking about, I think they call it wastewater or the water from the well. Is that one of, or is that the primary material, or are there other materials that could be brought to and from the site?
Well, There's a lot. I mean, TDG, waste oil, hydraulic oil, diesel oil, crude. There's a lot of really what we're talking about are materials, liquids that basically have some kind of risk to the individual or the environment, right? And so that is regulated, and when these drivers are transporting this material, they are required to be able to provide some details on that if they're stopped, and so that's the purpose of TDG, our TDG mobile app and our TDG paperless product is to really help automate and link that up. But more importantly, too, is it amazes me in this day and age, 2021, that we still use paper for a lot of these functions. And in fairness to using paper-based systems, there is a certain feeling of control people have in those environments, because hey, I'm filling out a form, and if I just don't agree with the format, maybe I scratch that out and fill something else in. If I need to make an annotation, I just write it down, right? So there is that feeling of control, but the difficulty with it is that you have to transpose that data. You don't have a real-time view of what's going on. Things do get lost, things do change, and all of this information is so much more easily tracked in a much more automated way. The drivers that we've spoken to and we speak to a lot, they really tell us that, look, what you can do to add value to my day is not make my day more complex, not add more paperwork, not add yet another bloody app that I have to work and learn and figure out. And so the reality is there's a balance here. And yes, we do have a new app. And yes, that is something that someone will use. But our goal at Payload has always been to create something that is as intuitive as possible, that enables the user to effectively not have to use an instruction manual. They should just be able to pick it up, start it, and do what they've got to do and get out. And it should stay out of their way, make their life easier. And that's what we've really achieved with this, because having these documents and having to file them out and deal with them is a real pain on the road. And now in the future, I see a future where your Transport Canada representative can effectively pull up the information for themselves and get those details. And we will probably get to a point, Tim, in the very near future, where you can start to link and geofence and track these types of items so that you don't even have to worry about it. You just, it's done at the site, you pick it up. When you go to the site to drop it off, everybody can see where it is. Everybody knows if there's an incident, boom, people can be there, and they know exactly what equipment they need and what protocols need to be taken to mitigate the situation, right? So,
well, and that is the beauty, because you can go from this constant sort of monitoring of people's activities, one boss for another boss for another boss, making sure you're going where you need to go, and that there's no mistakes happening in terms of transportation, that you're taking the right route, you're not taking too long to get there. But the geofencing you're talking about is terrific, right? Because then everybody involved knows, okay, these are the standards I need to follow, this is where I need to go. It makes things so much easier and much less hassle.
Yeah, and so on the payload side, we're actually working on. We'll have a release in the coming month to extend our product with some enhanced geofencing capabilities. And one of the things that's interesting working in this field, in this industry, is that there is a very deep culture of knowledge when it comes to things like safety and transportation and logistics and the process of doing business. And there's so much complexity and so much cost and so much risk involved. And so you really have to be careful about how you address these pieces, how you help a company. And that's something, a lesson Payload's learned, which is, our motto is really to be that platform, that enabler, not to be the dictator, right? So, we do have competitors in the space, and I love them because they're a great counterpoint for us to show why we have such value. Because, they will often come in and say, here's this great turnkey solution, hand us over the keys and the control, and all you have to do is pay a fee and you're good to go. And what we find is that it fails miserably. If there's probably the best way we get business is references from previous customers of our competitors, and that the reason I use that, I kind of lead in with that, is because that's also true with some of the new technology we're applying too. Is, I believe very strongly in taking an incremental approach. We want to be a disruptor, but we don't want to be a disruptor in a negative sense. We don't want to cause error, risk, and additional work and cost. We want to improve all of those things. We want to make it so there's less risk, less cost, right? And more awareness. And we want to really, my goal personally is I would love to help everyone have a job that has more meaning and more value to them. And I roll out of bed and I'm excited to get to work. I feel like everybody should have that opportunity. And so a lot of what we do enables companies to find better ways to utilize their people instead of having them transposing the same data over and over again between three different systems, right? So
there's some beautiful threads in there I'd like to pull on. One is, it occurred to me because I did, as I was Googling around trying to understand what your company does, see that there were some companies in very similar, if not adjacent spaces, right? And so I was wondering because one of the great things about paper, no matter all its disadvantages, it's completely interoperable, right? I can hire 17 vendors, and if we're all on paper, we get along. But if I'm I don't know how it's organized, but let's say I'm a contractor and I have a whole bunch of subcontractors, it would be great if we were all in the same system. But if we aren't, then how do we navigate that? And so there's two questions there. One is, how do customers navigate that? And second, does that imply an end game where you need to consolidate the services that are helping companies organize their work tickets and their logistics?
Oh, that's a great question. So let me back a bit and kind of add some flavor to your earlier statement, which is the idea that paper, is ubiquitous, and paper is something that's really interoperable. So you're not wrong in saying that,
but the forms are not.
But I will say that while the medium is certainly interoperable, the structure of the data and the format can very much differ from company to company, and to such an extent, we've seen forms that address the same subject matter, which have 5 fields, and the next person has 50. That's being a bit dramatic.
No, good point.
Won't be on those exact numbers, but it is to an order of magnitude often that there can be that level of complexity. So one of the things, and just so you know, I actually happen to sit as a chair of the business messages work group in the PIDEX group, and that's the Petroleum Interdata Exchange. And our job there is to help standardize data sharing for the oil and gas industry. And so one of the difficulties is that it's hard enough to get people to agree on a singular structure on paper. It's even harder to get them to agree to a standard and all the complexity that's entailed there. So once you start utilizing those standards, because they do have a ton of value, once you start utilizing them, you want to do so in a digital way, because that can often minimize a lot of the complexity and bring it down to a digestible level again.
So that's another theme in what you were saying earlier. The implication was, and I guess this is why the standards is so important, and why the work of something like PIDEX would be so important, is it, in my imagining, is it sort of akin to setting a schema in XML, where is it almost like a programming language where you're trying to set up how you would describe different data elements so that you can use a payload system, but we can also use a different system as well?
Yeah. So I mean, a couple things there. XML is pretty 90s. You and I both lived through those years, I'm sure, Tim. I would say that two pieces on that. In the PyDex context, yes, there are literally XML schemas and JSON schemas to help define and shape what that data is, so that two systems can integrate reliably, and do so in a way that they get not just the expected data structure, but also the intent or the meaning of that data. For instance, precision is always going to be something that two companies may disagree on. Is it 3 decimal places or 2?
Yeah.
From a payload perspective, we offer a couple really great solutions to that, and one of them is by not actually forcing a standard at all, and that is so we have what we call the data sharing service, and so our customers that sign on the e-ticket platform, they also get access to, or they can get access to the data share. And the data share is basically, we use Snowflake in the background. It's a cloud data warehouse. And what we can do is we define a data model and what we call the business view layer. And that allows companies to do all sorts of analytics and reporting. It also lets them ingest their data directly into their own data warehouses or their own data lakes. So that's kind of our solution to it, is by taking a step back and saying, as a customer, if you want us to structure it to a given format like PyDex, we can do that. But we're not going to force you to do that. We're going to, again, Payload enables the customer. We provide the tools, the access points. We make it as simple as a database connection to in real time access that cloud data warehouse. But it's up to you what level you want to take that to, and we're just here to support.
So, good point about XML. I am a little out of touch when it comes to programming. So I'm going to ask you a question. You probably cringe every time you sit next to somebody on a plane, because I'm going to ask the question they always ask, and that is, well, what role does blockchain play in this? Do you see a future? Because there's so much about what you're describing, which is creating certainty and an indelible record for authorities, for people who are on either side of the table when it comes to money and work.
I hate to come across as an iconoclast here, but from my perspective, there are times when we find good ideas and technologies and processes, and we find them in a way that we're looking for a problem to solve. And not to say that blockchain does not have value. I'm not going to pan it here. I do believe that blockchain has some very serious ramifications. And I think that over time, whether it's blockchain or the next incarnation, there will be a global system of record which is independent and difficult or impossible to maliciously inject code or changes into. I think that the idea of blockchain, frankly, it isn't new. That models existed for a very long time. Maybe not blockchain as we see it today, but very similar mechanisms for dealing with data privacy and ensuring change management. I think that blockchain is probably a bit ahead of where the rest of the industry is today. A lot of companies we're seeing, I think it's the statistic I saw most recently was something around 78% of the companies out there are still on pen and paper.
Yeah.
So imagine for a moment, you're the CEO or CTO or whichever of a large producer, and you're asked to go from a pen and paper system directly to a blockchain system. Right. Is it the right solution? Well, I'm not sure it is, honestly. It depends on your use case. It depends on what you're looking for. And if what you're looking to do is to have a system that works well with your processes and allows you to incrementally digitize your systems and move over, then I would submit that that might be a step too far right out the gate.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're in a space where blockchain is really making a lot more traction, I think fintech would probably be a space that would be particularly amenable to it. Or you're in a space where that there is a lot of penetration on the market on the blockchain side, then maybe that is an area you want to look at. But the challenge, Tim, is not even so much blockchain as a technology. The real challenge is, and let me put my systems architect hat on, or enterprise architect if you follow TOGAF. The difficult thing here is not so much in that the technology isn't appealing. It's in how do you leverage the existing investments and assets you have as a company to integrate and play well with that. Right. And that software ecosystem that most customers have, when you're talking about SAP, and you're talking about all the different accounting systems, if you don't use SAP for that as well, and Dynamics, AX, and all these different systems that you're going to be using, if they don't have ready-made integrations, then you're going to be building them. And even if they do, you're going to be hiring a lot of consultants and creating a lot of projects to make all of this work to suit the technology. And I think philosophically that's a bit backwards. I think that the technology should be solving the business problem, right?
Yeah.
So
well said.
That's my answer to you.
Yeah, no, well said. Let me explore that a little further, not to belabor it, but I think that part of some of the justification for blockchain is you want to arrange a trustless circumstance, right? You want to be able to not have to have faith in anyone except the system. Mm-hmm. But we're dealing with an industry where people have trusted each other enough to use paper for a long time. Yeah. So maybe it's a bridge too far. Like you want to kind of work your way toward something like that.
Well, yeah. And, maybe the question too is like, do you really want to work your way towards that? Is it really necessary? Is it, what people need to really understand is, and I fought with this as a software developer for much of my life. In programming, we used to, and we said this, by the way, before the book, I'm just going to put that out there, but programming is always shades of gray. Okay. And, and the reality is that, in programming, what I mean to say is that there's very rarely a right or a wrong solution. Yeah. There are just different solutions that work better in different scenarios. And that's just the way it is. I think there's a common joke that was applied to engineers before programmers, but the question is like, what's the best answer? And the response is, it depends. Sure. Right. And that's very, very true with a lot of what we're doing in business, because a lot of what we're doing in business is now permeated by technology and software. So, do you want to reach that point? Do you want to reach a point where you don't have to care and you can just throw it out there and trust? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you have a closed model. Maybe you have a preferred vendor list. And maybe the ecosystem you play in, you have solutions that dovetail into your own software ecosystem, into your own existing software investments very well. So, maybe you want the capability to go and change the record for whatever reason, right? That there are a lot of considerations, and I think it really depends. And that's not to say that the vision is not a viable one or not a valuable one. It's just to say that I think it depends on the context. Context is everything. And just because we can do it with a technology does not mean it's adding the most value to a customer's day.
Well said. So at the risk of throwing in another buzzword, I am curious because as you point out, technology is invading just about every sphere of life, and I'm pretty certain there has to be some attention being given to automation and robotics at the well site, which plays into Internet of Things. So that in turn plays into the idea that a lot of the information that you're capturing at the site doesn't have to even be input once. It could be drawn directly from the machinery involved. Do you see
Yeah.
that kind of thing going on?
To various levels, yes. So from Payload's perspective, we started from a place where right now the driver and the head office, they effectively utilize our web app and our mobile app directly, and they input that data as needed. That's the simplest. Sometimes the simplest path to a solution is the best. And again, it goes with our philosophy of allowing people to incrementally adapt to technology. But some of the things that we've started to look at, we've spoken with companies like Titan Logics as an example, who does IoT type devices. We've spoken to companies who work with the scales and the drop off points and whatnot. And there are options and solutions. It just comes down to integrations, right? So the challenge is there are a bevy of different products out there that address this problem space. There is no industry solution in general. It's much like the Wild West right now, which is just fine. It just comes down to, as a customer, from a payload perspective, can we do it? Of course we can do it. It comes down to what systems are you using and how would you like to integrate with it, right? And again, I think that there are organizations like the aforementioned PIDEX and others that will help us address these. But again, one of the things that we need to be cognizant of, in my perspective, is a very consumer centric one, which is if as a customer you don't want to go through the additional complexity of using standards and trying to over standardize things. You want to keep things very agile, and you want to have your operations as simple and as streamlined as possible. From that perspective, I'm not going to force you to do that. We do have a robust API. In fact, it's funny. I just had my product manager update our documentation. I think it's over 100 pages, so it's some real light reading, right? So we have very robust API on the e-ticket and eManifest side for integration, and really it just comes down to working with the customer and understanding what devices they're using and how they want to integrate. But the short answer to your question is yes. I don't think there's a standard turnkey solution there, and the ones that purport to be require a lot more than just the key. It's like you have to buy the whole car to make the turnkey solution, and that's often far more expensive and less desirable than utilizing what these companies are familiar with and what they need to just incrementally get to that next level and realize those optimizations.
So in the interest of doing the trifecta of buzzwords, let me get to the third one, and that is, with you collecting all this data at all the different sites, there's a temptation to say, okay, well, let's point machine learning at that and see what we can discover, or even like point data analysts at it. Really, there's an opportunity to really sort of see where the efficiencies and inefficiencies lie. How do you see a lot of scope for that? Is that something you're inviting people to do with the data you have?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like this is one of those areas where you get customers on one end that look at it from the perspective of, give me the data and leave me alone. I have my own BI team. I have my own experts. All I need is a conduit, right? I just need the data. So we have a couple of our customers. That's the exact service we provide through that cloud data warehouse. We have other customers who come back to us and say, I don't have anyone. I don't even know what a BI person is. And it sounds like, they just, forgot to buy some deodorant or something. I have no idea what you're talking about. And in that case, we're talking BI, AIML, all sorts of fun stuff. They're looking to us for solutions, and so we've tackled this problem on both levels. Customers work with us left, right, everywhere in between. And the solution really is that, we provide that cloud data warehouse, that integration point, programmatically as well as data level integrations, which makes it super easy for a company that's using like Power BI or something to ingest, all the way to using our other partners, Sigma, for doing really cool dashboard visualizations, which we're continually building those out and delivering those out into market. We have, I think we're been releasing one every couple of weeks over the last couple of months. So that's always happening. And I would say that, again, it's something where we can do the work on the payload side to guess what the customers want, or to get that feedback and try to consolidate what the market's looking for. And we do that. But where we find the most value is providing that data connection and working with our customers as partners to help them visualize and do some of the crazy cool stuff that they're doing with that data. And it is pretty wild.
So I've seen you use the analogy of a black, or compare the idea of a black box and a white box.
Yes.
And we're all familiar with the idea of a black box, which is all the inputs go in and then we get the input out, and we're like, we have to be satisfied with that. We don't know what's going on inside. A white box is the opposite. So how does Payload sort of bill itself as a white box?
Yeah. So, I think you described it very well. A lot of, in our field, in our industry right now, there's a lot of companies out there trying to find solutions to automate, to reduce costs and to drive efficiencies. And a lot of the solutions, as you said, look like a black box. In fact, they'll purport to be one, where basically hand us over the keys and we'll take care of everything, and that really often means that the integrations they have and the interoperability comes down to two very distinct endpoints, and there's very little flexibility in between. Where Payload differs is that our API has the ability to allow customers to integrate at a much deeper level, and at different various points in our workflows. So as an example, we do have a customer, for instance, Payload really starts at the logistics side. And so we start at the orders and the field ticket side when it comes to our e-ticketing product. We have customers who are using other systems, Stratix or Peloton, those LandView, WellView type apps and asset management stuff further upstream. So what they've done is they've used things like Process Maker and these other workflow type tools, and they've integrated directly to us to do things like, they have an AFE that gets created in their project management software, and they generate orders through their custom software that they've built 10 years ago, right, in COBOL or Java or whatever, right? And those those orders need to be linked up with us. So they use our API and they inject and auto create those orders. And we handle all the drive, we'll work with within our system. They can handle all the dispatching and assignment and delivery and whatnot. And then when it comes back and we get the data after the deliveries, we can then, they integrate with us to ingest that data and then follow it all the way up to their accounts receivable or their AFE reconciliation and whatnot, and it forms a complete loop. So can you do that with other systems? Sure. I mean, it's not to say we have a monopoly on being able to integrate. That would be silly, and I'm not suggesting that. What I am saying is that our approach to integration is built in such a way that we're meant to be a platform upon which you can build, right? Whereas the black box, that to me is the very definition and the goal of a white box solution, is to expose the capabilities so you can build upon it. Whereas a black box is really intended to displace and link in at the two endpoints. And so in this case, the way they would manage this, depending on the products, and we had this discussion with them because they did remove a previous product where they were unable to link in at that level, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the key differentiators for us.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think as far as a business strategy goes, I understand the temptation to lock people in, but the fact that you're not locking people in is going to entice people to come on board. And even the fact that you have this openness to the idea of connecting into other systems means you can be a focal point, you can be a hub.
Yeah, and back to your white box kind of a analogy there. One of the interesting dynamics is, as I said earlier, and one would be right in challenging me on my answer previously, which is you already said that it always depends. There's always, so how can you say that a white box is always the right solution, right? And that would be an excellent question and a good challenge. And my answer to that is this. The beauty of the approach with Payload is that it's not just the idea of being a white box to us, it's the idea of being a platform and a connected platform. And because we are combining the white box approach with the platform dynamic, what that gives us is a system where if a customer chooses, we have partners, we have friends of Payload, if you will, that have these other solutions. We can integrate those pieces and collectively supply a black box. So we're capable of both. And that is the power of being a white box based platform, if you will, for lack of better terms here, but what I call an open platform,
Right.
right? That's the advantage and the power of it. And from a business perspective, it's not as sexy for investors because the black box pitch is we're going to replace everybody and all the money is going to come to us, right? But I think that that's too constraining and restrictive to customers because you're forcing them to displace a ton of process, people, a lot of knowledge they have. The technology is that you're dropping in. One of the realities of software today is that it's all based on integrations, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no silver bullet. We realized that many years ago. SAPs and the JD Edwards of the day had their chance. Most companies now have figured out that yes, there is value in these platforms, 100%, but they don't solve everything. Right. And so the old approach was, let's just buy one thing, it solves everything, and we're done. Well, we know that there's no silver bullet. So get over it. You're going to deal with integrations. It's just the way it's going to be. Yeah. But the way in which we handle those integrations, the way in which we design our solutions can make those integrations very synergistic and trouble-free, right? And that's the goal of Payload, is to embrace that and say that, look, we're not here to try to be greedy about capturing the whole pie per se. We're going to execute on what we do, and we're going to be the best at what we do, and that is how we have progressed. And we're going to recognize the fact that we need to play nice, not just with competitors and partners out there and third parties, but also with the fact that many customers have overlap in their own internal systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to explore a little bit sort of the mechanics of how Payload goes about creating its products. And you mentioned earlier, I think you used the word incremental, which is my go-to approach as well, partly informed by design thinking. It's this idea that you don't know everything and you never will. So you got to try something and see what you learn, and then you have a new vista from which to try new things. Mm-hmm. How do you know? So first of all, because you do that, how do you know when to pivot, so to give up on an idea, and when do you double down on an idea? Because sometimes you can give up on things too soon, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. So our process internally, and I hesitate because I don't want to get too technical, but long story short, we use an agile process in how we develop, but we also use an agile process in how we design and how we theory craft our products. And a lot of that includes feedback from customers. So the way we shape our products is we first find where the pain points are. We understand where's the greatest value to our customer next, right? Once we've established that new beachhead, then we put all our minds in a room and we say, okay, let's start to really theory craft this and figure out what are some ways in which not just we can solve the problem as it is, but how can we disrupt? How can we find a better way? As we do that, we then communicate back out to not just our customers, but to industry and to partners and say, help us understand how this problem, how this solution is good or bad, right? Where it's weak, where it's strong. And then we follow an approach, again, we're an agile shop, we follow the MVP approach, so the minimum viable product. So once we've established the wish list, the universe of all features that we'd want, we go through and we basically find what is the nut of this? What is the first piece that adds value?
Yeah.
And then to dovetail this back to your original question, Tim, once we have that MVP, we get that out there as fast as possible. I have what I call a fail fast approach, right?
Yep.
And it means, my motto is fail fast, fail often, win, right? And that's how it works, right? Because you get out there, you do little incremental misses, and you learn, and you take that MVP, you've addressed the core problem. 99% of that's not going to change.
Sure.
But the stuff that you learn to change it going forward will. And so by doing it incrementally in that way, we do very rapid release cycles every couple of weeks. We have our sprint reviews. We communicate that with our customers and get feedback all the time. And it just becomes this continuous cycle of growing and improving. And so while we have our fail fast mentality internally, the customer doesn't really feel or see that, because what they see is a product just slowly progressing in the direction they want, or rapidly, depending on the situation, right? So that's kind of our approach.
Chris, I love that. And you've introduced me to a new term, which is theory crafting, which I can imagine what that is, but is that sort of the definition phase of design thinking, where you're trying to come up with what the nature of the problem is you're going to solve?
Well, so full disclosure, I don't know where the origin of that term comes from out in the general nomenclature there, but for me, that's a term that I've used because I've heard things like brainstorming, mind mapping, things like that. I really like the idea of theory crafting, because to me, that term describes the beginning of how can we start to imagine a solution. So to me, it emphasizes the fact that we're crafting a solution, and it's based on our own theories and assumptions, right? And so that's something that happens day one. There in the old days, there was this great term that IBM coined. It was called JAD, or Joint Application Development. And what it described was the process as a company or service provider of sitting in a room with your customer to have this dialogue and figure out what their business requirements were and shape the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what theory crafting in today's world means to me, is a much lighter weight approach to that. That is the step before that, before you talk to the customer. Let's see if we can theory craft and add value to that next conversation by coming up with some progressive ideas and helping set the stage. So that to me is the theory crafting.
I love it. I'm going to add that to my toolbox for sure. So let me see if because I imagine a worldview where and it comes from design thinking again, and it's this idea that you have desirability, feasibility, and viability. And what you just described sort of walked us through that idea. So you discover a need, you have a theory on how to solve it, and you have to come up with a way to address that. But then you also have to find a way to inject that into the marketplace, right? To find if there is a market for that, if people will be willing to pay enough for it, so that you can continue doing so that you can continue incrementing on it, right? Is that a fair way to describe it, or have I sort of glossed over a phase that you use?
No, I think that that's a pretty reasonable way to describe it. And yeah, Tim, what I'll say is I have several mentors in my life, people that I would say have had influence and impact on my growth as a leader and businessman. And currently I'm working with Stefan from the Workman Family Office, and he has a very interesting way of distilling these things down to what are the core, what's the essence of the problem we need to solve, and let's understand and quantify that in a way that means something to everyone. And so I would say, to add to your model, having a technical bent most of my career and being very fixated on the technical side of things, over the last decade, I've really transitioned into having a much broader perspective from the business perspective as well. And I would say that one of the interesting exercises that we do too is we do a bit of a revenue justification, right? And that sounds like something that may not benefit the customer, but the amazing thing is that it absolutely benefits our customers, and it does so in surprising ways. But the one way I'll share is that in that you've talked about the 3 steps, and I would argue that there can be more or less depending on the problem space. I think that less is unlikely, but certainly there can be more if you want to break it out more. But regardless of the granularity, one of the things that we do try to do is we try to look at who are our customers, who are our target audience, understanding their needs, and then understanding and justifying the revenue based on that. And what that does is it gives us a realistic view on what's really important to the customer. Because if you don't do that, then you start to get into this ivory tower kind of thinking, where you think of the build it and they'll come type of approach.
Before you know it, you've made a blockchain.
Well, yeah, maybe, right? And the reality is that if you try to be more pragmatic and apply that litmus test of the revenue perspective, you're not just finding a way to make money per se, and obviously that is a component there. But more importantly, to me anyhow, is the notion that you're finding a way to serve the customer in a truly win-win situation. And I'll be honest with you, Tim, I never have liked sales. It's been very uncomfortable to me my whole life.
Yeah.
So the best way for me to address that, especially in the role of a CEO, which I am most definitely attached to all facets of the organization now, including sales, is to have a genuine product where I've done the homework, I understand the problem, and I understand the value we bring. When I have that, I don't have to sell. I can just say, here's what we have to offer. Here's the case. It's up to you, right? And the beauty about Payload is, again, going back to our core philosophy of being that open platform, is that I can do so in a way where I also don't need to be pushy. I don't need to tell them, oh, get rid of those pieces. Oh, sorry, you put down 2.3 million per annum for that system over there, the ERP system. You want to use us, I don't have to make uncomfortable arguments like that. I can just provide an open solution, say, where can we help? And this is the point we can identify, and let's just start there. And here's the justification for it. So that's the piece I would add to your formula there, your mini blockchain, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, because you've really articulated the lean startup ethos, which is there's no point developing something extremely convoluted only to find out that even just the first feature of it wasn't going to survive in the marketplace. And when I say survive in the marketplace, I think we're coming at the same topic the same way, and that is, if it's not creating value for a customer to the extent that they're willing to pay for it, then you can't afford to keep that product going and make it into a quality, constantly improving product.
Yeah.
So you got that flywheel effect where you're working with the customer and saying, tell me what your pain point is. We'll see if we can make something to address it, and let's see if you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and
right?
you're 100% right, Tim. And the interesting thing for me is, on my side, my background, like I said, was very technology focused, and so it's funny because I will look at the infrastructure costs of different companies that I've worked at, what was their monthly overhead to maintain their systems, and often it was tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. I can build a cloud-based infinite scale system that performance-wise is second to none, and I can do that for hundreds of dollars a month.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the cost of the infrastructure side itself isn't the cost. The biggest cost for us, and to your point in terms of what is important, is the fact that we have very highly trained, passionate people here, and when our customers engage with us, we do become partners. And so for us, the cost and the revenue question is really predicated not so much around the technology side, and I can build a very lean, efficient system. That's not an issue. It's more the cost of providing and enabling the very high level of service.
Interesting. Okay, let me see if I can echo that to make sure I understood it. That often the construction of the technological solution is fairly inexpensive, but what's expensive is gearing up your team and also gearing up your customers to use that service. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So as an example, like, I wouldn't say the construction's necessarily inexpensive because you're hiring very high quality developers and folks on that side. What I'm saying is that, when your earlier comment, when we're talking about running a software system and the costs of operating it, the day-to-day costs, like maintaining the database, the infrastructure, the continuous integration, continuous deployment environments that we have, the dev environments, the sandboxes, things like that are not central to what we provide to the customer in terms of the overall cost.
Right.
Case in point, with our data share service, it's like $500 a month to get a full scale cloud data warehouse and access to that, and have your own space to play in and be able to integrate with us at the data level. I mean, that's cheap. And really what we charge for is more on the, for us, the bigger cost and the thing that I have to look at for the health of the company and obviously to serve our customers well, is the cost of the people that we employ, the service that we deliver, and the obviously the R&D. So
right.
That's really where the costs are. And that's really why when we do that revenue justification, what we're really looking at, as you say, is how can we as a company responsibly provide a service to our customers that we can assure will be around for many, many years and not be some kind of, like Google does this, right? They're a bigger company, they can get away with it, I guess. But
yeah.
They'll try some new social media app or something like that, and it will be around for 3 months. They'll be like, that wasn't so good. We're just going to ditch it and move on to the next thing, right? That's not the type of company we are, and so for us, there's a bit more due diligence up front, and there's a stronger commitment to our customers, and a lot of that's predicated around that R&D and the service engagement side. So.
Thanks, Chris. This is fascinating. We're in the home stretch. I promise not to keep you all night, but I do have a couple more questions. You talked earlier about how you were constantly talking with the truckers and people who are on the job site to get feedback on your system. Mm-hmm. How do you go about getting feedback from people in general, the various touch points of the systems that you provide?
Yeah, there's a number of ways. So first of all, don't worry if they're dissatisfied. You will know, and you
Sure.
do not need to go out of your way to provide facilities for that. Fortunately for us, all of our users have had, I would say the vast majority of our users, anyhow, have had nothing but exemplary things to say about us, and I would say all of them see value in Payload and in what we do. The ways in which they reach us, there's a few ways. We have run what we call a user committee, and so we'll get some of our customers and invite kind of an open mic forum to have a discussion. Obviously, with COVID, that's something we haven't done as much. Not to say we can't do it. I mean,
You
it's
do it like
Zoom
this.
away, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that we can't do it. It's just what we've found is over the last year, companies are really focused in on a few key activities, and they seem to be narrowing their focus, and really that's led us as a company to narrow our focus a bit in making sure that we're adding value to what they need today. And so we will continue to do those user councils and get that feedback. I find that the way we get the best response, though, is really by engaging our customers and helping them with some activities on their side. So we've had a couple customers reach out to us and say, look, we want your help building some reports. We want your help doing some analytics, right? And those are areas that we sit down, we engage the customer, and we both learn so much, right?
Yeah.
And it's really probably one of the best ways that we've found to learn is just to put ourselves in their seat and really tackle that problem. And what that leads to, and I apologize up front to the developers watching this by bastardizing this term a little bit, but we do what we call a hackathon. So we have a yearly hackathon at Payload that we do internally, and that's just a Payload thing. And we've been doing that for the last couple of years of Payload, and with much of my team years before that at another company. The other thing we do are what we call like a mini hackathon, or we'll call them a hackathon from the customer's perspective. And what that is we'll actually invite the customer in. They'll bring some of their people, we'll bring ours, and we'll just sit around the table, virtual or otherwise, and we will, as we said before, theory craft together. We'll bring up some of the pain points, and then we'll spend usually it's a 2-day exercise.
Yeah.
But it could be 1 day, it could be a week. It depends on the customer and on what both sides see as value. And we'll actually work together to find solutions and hack together solutions to those problems and understand them better. And what will often come out of that is that those ideas will feed back into our roadmap. And so we will hack together those solutions. We'll come up with those cool ideas, and then we'll put that and inject it back into our roadmap. And it's a really cool experience because our customers are very loyal, and the reason they are is because we actually care what they think, and we prove it because we actually work with them. We lift the hood, and we have them dive in with us and help us build a better product, right? Yeah. And so those are some of the ways in which we engage our customers, apart from the emails and other more mundane ways that you'd imagine.
So that mini, I think you called it a mini hackathon at the end there, where you invite your customers in. Was that what that was called?
Yeah, I mean, we call it just a hackathon.
But I mean, it resembles in many ways a design sprint. Have you encountered that term?
Yeah.
It really feels like that, and the advantage is you've boiled it down to a day or two.
Yeah, or using, like I said, older vernacular, and this is dating myself, a JAD session. There are many terms. The reason I refer to it as a hackathon in today's context is because we try to remove the formality out of it. So we try to just have an open mic, laid back session, and often the objectives, depending on the customer, some customers are very strict about, here's some of the things we'd like to achieve, right? That doesn't have quite the same hackathon feel. And that's okay. I mean, it's fine. in many ways it makes it easier, right? Because you have you've quantified what it means to be successful in those couple days, right? But other customers don't know what they want, and that's probably the most common scenario. And all they know is that some things don't feel the way they want them to feel, and they need that time to dive in and talk to the people in the room on the payload side to say, hey guys, here's what I'm feeling. I don't know how to articulate this to you. I don't know what the solution is. All I know is, I need to do X. And so that's where the hackathon, and that's why I like to refer to a hackathon, is to keep that level of informality, because that's where we see a lot of value. We had a customer, a good example is one of our customers, we used to do a CSV export and then an SFTP integration.
Sure.
And
which is this is paper, this is CSV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, who the heck does file drops anymore? Well, actually, most of the competitors out there do. In fact, a couple of them advertise it on their page, which I find really funny. But remember, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't as informed as you and I, Tim, when it comes to software development methodologies. To the layperson, that may seem like, oh wow, that's fine.
It works.
Right? And people, I'm here to tell you that is not fun. And I'll leave it as an exercise to the listener to discover why. It's a long, sordid tale. But the Coles notes here is that it's a very primitive and very inflexible way to integrate two systems. Anyways, they were doing. We had the CSV and SFTP, and when we put together when I joined Payload, that was one of the first things I had to deal with. And I was like, this is crazy. And so I think it took us maybe a few weeks, and overall within the course of a month, we had deployed out a cloud data warehouse into production, and we integrated them there, and all they did was a query and it went directly into their system. And so we got rid of flat files, we got rid of the SFTP server, got rid of all the key management and everything they had to do there, and boom, it just works. And unlike the SFTP, which every so often their server would go down or something would happen and they didn't get the file, and you have to, it just works, and it just works all the time, every time, and it's super easy. Having those hackathons and having those discovery sessions and working with your customers to understand their needs sometimes yields greater dividends than just being a salesperson selling a license or a seat to your product. And that's, again, part of the Payload philosophy, part of that open white box philosophy, is we want to let you in and help us build a better product.
So this has been fascinating. I promised you we were close to the end, and I know we're running out of time, but there's two themes I wanted to bring up before we part ways, so you calibrate how much time you have to talk about them. One is, how do you shape the culture at Payload, especially since you say you've been growing so fast? Mm-hmm. And also, how do you go about finding the right candidates to fill your positions? What is sort of the mindset you bring to hiring?
Well, listen, at the risk of self-aggrandizement here, I would say that the latter question is a really simple one for me. I have a very strong network, and I know a lot of folks in Calgary, in the area. I've worked here for much of my life, and I have a reputation of being someone who genuinely cares about the people around me and wants to see them succeed, and that's paid dividends later on in life, because now as a CEO, I don't find myself really requiring a lot of help to recruit people. Especially, I mean, that's not entirely true, Tim, in the sense that, for instance, if I were hiring salespeople or marketing, right, then yes, it's outside of the norm of my network, right? I still have contacts there, that's fine, but if you're talking developers or architects or anything on the technology side, that's not a problem.
So that gives you a big pool, but how do you know that what you select will fit, and what's the shape of what you're trying to create?
Yeah. So for us, the key is attitude. The key is the individual. right? So what we do is we go through a multi-layered interview process. It's very rigorous. We do, the initial phone interviews, then we do the traditional interview, where it'll be myself and my principal architect Alex will likely interview these candidates, and we'll try to find people who have the technical acumen, but also have the passion. And passion is really key. And you can identify that over the next couple of steps, the last of which culminates in what I call the gauntlet. And so whenever we hire someone, we run the gauntlet, and the gauntlet is essentially you get interviewed by every person on the team. And that's a big round table. And we'll do the coding exercise usually as a third step in that. But the biggest one is the gauntlet. And in the gauntlet, everyone comes to that session with questions. And at the end of that exercise, everyone is asked, yay or nay, right? Mm-hmm. And my rule is, if there's any more than one nay, then it's a no. If there's just one, or there's a couple uncertain, then we have a dialogue as a team. And if we do not reach consensus, then we do not hire the candidate. And what that does is it creates an ownership for everyone in the company on hiring that individual. It's not Chris hiring some developer, throwing them on the team, and then they have to deal with it. It's the team deciding that hire. And often I will not have a vote in that, and I don't speak in it. I let everybody else make that determination, because if they got to that stage, then I feel that they're candidates. So it's up to the team to make the final assessment. To your first question, really comes down to culture. Well, listen, that's something I care deeply about. I've worked in this industry for a long time now. 22, 24 years of being in tech, at least. If you count co-ops and that, 26 or so, right? And I've worked in a lot of scenarios where I was very dissatisfied with the people, that the leadership in particular. I very rarely had a problem with my coworkers. It was always this lack of passion and this lack of willingness to learn and support. So what that did is that really helped inspire me to become one of the good guys, I like to say, right? One of the leaders that puts people first. So I'm an empathy-driven leader, and my approach is servant-based leadership. And the way in which I build cultures and the way in which I succeed, as an organization, as a businessman, as an individual, as a team player, really comes down to the fact that I've embraced the idea that if I do one thing well as a leader, it should be to clear all the barriers for those around me to enable them to succeed. And it's never failed me. And I feel that servant-based leadership, clearing obstacles and enabling those around you, and hiring, back to our other point, really top-notch, passionate folks, you just never lose. And that's the way it is. And to this day, as a CTO of my former life, my teams were always, my department was always number one in productivity, and always a key part or success story of the company we were at. And that's not a comment on me; it's a comment on the fact that all I really have to do is bring the right people together and enable them to succeed. And so that's what I do. And I try to also just be a good person, to genuinely care about people, and be honest and upfront. And it creates a culture that reflects those values. And that, in my opinion, creates a culture of success.
Excellent. On that note, it certainly sounds like Payload is a great place to work, but you've also made it sound like Calgary is a place close to your heart. So the final question is, what advice would you have for somebody who is contemplating a move to Calgary?
Oh, well, yeah, Calgary is awesome. I by the way, I was born in Chatham, Ontario. I went to university in Prince George, BC.
Yeah.
Nothing against either province; both are wonderful, actually. But I think Calgary, and I can't speak to the rest of Alberta much. I'll be honest. My experience. I grew up in Okotoks and lived in Calgary, and now live in Cochrane. So obviously, I'm a bit biased as to the regional
Yeah.
opinion here, but. The fact is that I find Calgary, in my experience across Canada, has a uniquely business-centric perspective on the world and is really, I think, a progressive, what's the right word here? Like it has the gravity for business and innovation. And I think that anyone looking to move to Calgary, the key really is to just step up every day. Be a positive influencer wherever you work, wherever you go, and the rest follows. This is a great community. The people around here are all very supportive. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or developer or whatever. None of those things truly matter. What really matters is your willingness to have a positive impact on the people and the business and the community around you. So if you're that type of person, welcome aboard and enjoy the prosperity you will definitely gain.
Thank you so much, Chris. This was terrific.
Thank you, Tim. It's been an honor.
My pleasure. My guest today was Chris Lambert. His LinkedIn address and Payload Technologies website will be in the show notes. My name is Tim Hampton, and you can reach me at tim@unusuallywellinformed.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you will subscribe and join me for the next show with another unusually well-informed leader in business and technology.
Thank you for listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
The opinions expressed by the host and guests on the Unusually Well-Informed podcast are their own and do not reflect that of their employer or any other affiliation.